Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Korean Film Council's official podcast, Korean Cinema Today. This is June Kim, your co-host, along with Piers Conran. We both write for Kofik's English news website, kobiz, at koreanfilm.or.kr. Welcome, Piers.
Hi, June, and hello, everyone. I'm Piers, your co-host for today, and I'm a writer for Kofik's English news service, as well as a producer here in Korea and a writer for the international film site twitchfilm.com. Now, before we start, I'd just like to remind our listeners that you can, of course, visit our website, which once again is koreanfilm.or.kr, to get all the up-to-date information on anything related to Korean cinema. That's interviews, features, news, and much more. You can access our webzine, our digital magazine, sign up for our newsletter, and also find this podcast once again.
That's right. And also don't forget to follow and like us through our social media accounts, including Facebook at facebook.com/kobiz.kofik or on our Twitter handle, twitter.com/KoreanFilmBiz. That's BIZ.
And so today we have a very special guest with us today, a name that will be familiar to anyone who knows anything about Korean film, and that is, of course, the long-standing Seoul-based Korean film critic Darcy Paquet, who is the director of the Wildflower Independent Film Awards, as well as a consultant for the Udine Far East Film Festival and the San Sebastian International Film Festival. So welcome, Darcy.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
By now, by the time this podcast is live, the nominations for the 2015 Wildflower Awards will be released, which is what we would like to focus on today. So for our listeners who are not familiar with the awards, could you brief us on what they're about?
Yeah, I mean, basically, Korea has a lot of award ceremonies. And if you follow Korean cinema, you know that they're the Grand Bell Awards and the Blue Dragon Awards, and I mean, quite a few, Critics' Choice. And for the most part, up until this point, most of these awards have focused pretty much primarily on the big commercial films that come out every year. And although there have been a lot of independent films that have been made, it's, with a few exceptions, it's been rare that they get a lot of attention from these big award ceremonies. If we look at the US, they have the Independent Spirit Awards. Britain has the British Independent Film Awards. And with all of these awards, there's the issue of how do you define independent, but it was kind of this long-standing idea or dream of mine to start a film awards ceremony that focused on independent films, low-budget films. And I mean, just generally films that are made outside of kind of the mainstream system in Korea.
So yeah, it has been a long idea for you. I think you mentioned on Facebook the other day that the first germ of this idea came calling in 2009.
Mm. Yeah, it was. I was writing a monthly column at that time, and 2009 was kind of a special year because that was the first time that really we had a lot of independent films released in theaters. And whereas previously, the independent films that were being made would often be screened at film festivals, and a few of them would get a mainstream, a commercial release. It was rare, but I mean, things did begin to change in 2009. There was some support for establishing, theaters devoted to independent cinema. And thanks to that, quite a large number of them got released. And it just seemed to me, I was writing the column at the end of 2009, kind of looking back over the year and realizing that for me, a lot of my favorite films from the year were independent films. But again, I mean, the Grand Bell Awards were coming out and they were ignoring all these really interesting lower budget films. And yeah, and then the idea hit me and I thought, God, it would be great if somebody made these awards. So I wrote this column kind of giving the idea to anybody who wanted to take it and run it. And I actually heard from someone who said that, they had a similar idea. They were thinking about, making a film awards ceremony devoted to films that had a budget of under 500 million won. But I guess that didn't happen. And, a few years passed and I just reached a point where I thought, I'd like to try to make it work. And so it's very hard getting it off the ground, but luckily I had some people come in and help me with that. Some people who had experience, doing big events like this, particularly Oh Dong-jin, a local critic who has worked for various festivals. And so last year we barely came through and held a successful ceremony, and so we're busy getting ready for the second one.
Absolutely. And so with one edition under your belt now, what has changed for this upcoming one?
I don't think that people will notice really big changes. There are a few changes. We're trying to kind of solidify the awards. We redid the categories. And I think that we'll stick with these revised categories, for as long as we can into the future and not change them too much. But we introduced a grand prize, whereas last year we had kind of a dual top prizes, the top documentary and the top narrative film. And this year we'll be picking one grand prize among, the nominations for documentaries and narrative films. And we introduced a screenplay prize, which I think we had neglected to put in last time. And little things like that. The other big project that took a lot of my time was putting together a book that will come out together with the awards. And so this isn't a book necessarily on films that, are going to receive awards or be nominated, because the book was put together before we did all that voting. But the idea was just to look at some of the films that made an impression in 2014. And so we asked different writers to, contribute work, including one by you, Pierce. And yeah, so we covered 11 films. Next year, the goal is to make it somewhat bigger so that we can cover a broader range of films, including some that maybe got less attention that they deserved.
So you're already kind of expanding the focus of the awards. But let me ask you, after that first edition, what kind of challenges did you have to kind of face, and what have you kind of learned going forward?
The biggest challenge I think was, fundraising is always a challenge for events like this. And we weren't a situation where we had a big sponsor come in and say, let's make these awards. We made them first, and then we went around and looking for support. And so we had a lot of discussions over the past years with different companies, but it is kind of hard to find a perfect match. And so this year's, rather than one big sponsor, we've had kind of a lot of smaller sponsors who've come in and helped us, individuals as well. A lot of people in the film industry who felt that there's a need for this type of award ceremony, and they wanted to support us with what we were doing. And so I feel really thankful to all these directors and other people who, contributed to this fund. We have a Funding 21 campaign. It's a site that's run by Cine 21 Film Magazine, and similar to Kickstarter in some ways, but that's allowed us to kind of provide a central place where we can raise money.
Clearly organizing an event like this takes a lot of different types of efforts, and funding is definitely one of the difficulties. But you've done it successfully last year. How were the awards been received in the industry?
I was, very pleasantly surprised. I suspected that people would agree that there's a need for something like this. Although I wasn't really sure how the awards themselves would be presented, because it is a very, it's kind of a sensitive issue in some ways. And already there are a lot of award ceremonies. I thought that some people might feel, there are too many already. Do we really need to make one more? And I was also, concerned because the independent film community itself is a community with a lot of pride. They work very hard. They're generally not the kind of people who make films because they hope to get rich. They have this strong idealism involved in a lot of their films, from documentaries to narrative films. And, I'm not really an insider in that community either. And so I wasn't sure how they'd feel about kind of an outsider coming in and, setting up these awards. And I don't really want to step on people's toes. And, like the Seoul Independent Film Festival is a very established festival. It's a different kind of event than ours. But I didn't want to be seen as competing with that. For the most part, I think that, we made some, we made some mistakes in marketing, I think, and the way we pitched the awards in some ways. But broadly, I think people were really positive. A lot of directors came and kind of offered to present the awards. And then throughout the past year, I've just been hearing from people that, they're really happy that this was launched. In some ways, maybe it was an advantage that I'm outside because, being a step removed can also be an advantage in the sense that you're not aligned with one particular part of the community. And so in some ways, that's turned out to be an advantage as well.
Although you say outsider, but you have appeared in probably half a dozen independent films. Looking at the structure of the awards and you at the helm of it, can you explain a little bit how it breaks down?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I'm the sort of the figurehead in a way, and it was my idea, and I'm responsible, I guess, primarily for the vision of the awards, kind of the aesthetic of the awards to a certain extent. Oh Dong-jin, who works together with me, is more in charge of kind of the practical day-to-day tasks of, getting everything organized and raising money and doing other types of things. Although we work together, I think that it's probably true for other festivals as well. When you organize something like this, the way that it ends up happening is rather than constantly sitting down and doing meetings, you end up forming a kind of a messaging group, a Kakao Talk group with, we have our marketing manager in that, and we have, the two of us, we have the person who's in charge of designing the party. And then whenever any issue comes up, then we're all talking back and forth. So that's been the most efficient way to go about it. But yeah, again, my primary goal is, I guess, just to make sure that we kind of stick to our vision of what we want this to be, and that we don't get too caught up in kind of side issues, and that we kind of remain focused on the main purpose of the awards.
Now that we know about the structure of the awards, can you tell us what the nomination selection process is like, and how many films does the community need to watch?
Yeah, I wanted in some ways to involve ordinary viewers in this, and to make it, I don't know, we put together a group. In Korean, it's 평가단, you could say, like critics group or like a selection committee. And there are 25 of us who, throughout the year, we're watching films as they come out in theaters. We would, often we'd go together. Sometimes we'd, just watch them all separately. But this is a group that includes some people who have some work, official work in the film industry, but a lot of people who are just kind of regular fans of independent cinema. And I wanted to bring those opinions into the selection process as well. And so at the end of the year, we have a round of voting. Rather than getting together and choose together in a room, up till now we've used a voting process. And so it's quite simple for each category. Everybody submits their votes, and then the film with the most votes win. And we'll be doing the same for the final selection of the awards, except that we'll have more people participating. One of the challenges for selecting the nominations is that there's so many films released, and so to really be able to take part in this process, you have to have seen a good percentage of the 90 films that were released, in the past year. There were around 60 independent narrative films and about 30 documentaries. I don't think it's possible for every person to watch all of those films, but as a group, we watched, I think, all of them. And through the voting, we were able to choose the nominations.
And recently, you kind of premiered a series of really beautiful posters for the awards, and also, as you mentioned, the book before. Each of those essays came with an illustration, and those were also released recently, and all very beautiful prints. And I believe they all come from the same company, which is Alternative Graphics Propaganda.
Yes.
And so, could you tell us a little bit about that? You've really kind of seem to be focused on kind of having an image for the festival this year.
Yeah, a friend of mine introduced me to Choi Ji-young, who's the head of propaganda. And that was a really fortunate thing, I think, because their work has been a big part of establishing an image for our festival. And I did really, from the beginning, I wanted to involve in some ways artists in other fields, and to draw some kind of link between the work that independent filmmakers are doing and, artists, and also with the trophies. Our trophies are done by a professor he's a ceramics artist. He's quite talented, and he offered to, take part in making the trophies for the ceremony. And so they're ceramic trophies. They're not the metal type trophies that you see in most other film festivals, but I think for us that's very appropriate, and I really like the look of them. And I just got a glimpse of the upcoming trophies for this year, and I think that they're even better than last year. So
So they're going to be different from how they
yeah,
were
it's
last
the
year?
same artist, but he made some modifications to it, and so I'm very happy about that. Propaganda, they have a good network among illustrators, and so for each of the films that we wrote about in the book, they contacted an illustrator and asked them to make an illustration based on the film, and I really like that just because it's a visual interpretation of the film, and and so it's kind of a different take on what critics are doing. Critics are, providing their own impression of the film in words, and then at the same time we have these illustrations. The poster was also the main image was from an illustrator who works in Korea, does a lot of different types of graphic design, but they're I think they're quite interesting and forceful images that I don't know. It's kind of I don't know. It feels like a privilege to be able to use these images, for our event, and so I was very happy to get those.
Absolutely. No, there's a series of terrific images, and as you say, kind of a different perspective on the films, perhaps more immediate than reading a review, such as we might write. And great stuff. And Propaganda really do great stuff. I follow them on Twitter, and they do lots of posters for Korean films, and they're really, really great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they do also work with a lot of independent films. They help directors and with the film archive as well. And so for a long time, I was admiring their work without knowing who they are, and occasionally posting their things on Twitter, work they've done for the Korean Film Archive. And then it was only later after I was introduced that I realized that they were responsible for all of this stuff that I really liked.
Great. Going back to challenges and difficulties, you've already mentioned funding, but have you faced any other challenges mounting to the second edition?
Yeah, I think that just it's really difficult kind of managing keeping the awards focused. A lot of people were very interested, but we needed to kind of make sure that we had a vision and that we kind of stuck to it, and that there were a lot of ideas being thrown around about different directions that the awards could take, and all of them good ideas. And so, of course, but you can't do everything, and so I think that probably an event like this, the first 3 years are the most crucial years. Yeah. It's when you establish your identity. It's when people get an impression of what it's like. And just in terms of organization and other things, you find a footing in those first years. But we're still not quite there yet. It's kind of, and so the process itself is probably taking longer than it would otherwise. It's not as streamlined. And we're going still to a certain extent by trial and error. And so, I'm fairly confident. I'm speaking now a couple of weeks before the ceremony itself is going to be held. I'm fairly confident that things are going to go well from the outside. But, of course, from the inside, it's a very chaotic process. And so in the coming years, I'm sure that things will be much more streamlined. And we do have a screening series as well. Last year, we were actually able to screen more films. And this year, we're working with Seoul Theatre, who's been very supportive of this project, and so we're really happy to be working with them. But I think this year we have 6 films, and we're arranging to screen those in the 3 days leading up to the ceremony itself. And I'm hoping that if we get a lot of people coming in and a lot of interest, then that will be a good excuse to expand them more in the coming years.
And so what day are the awards and these screenings?
The awards ceremony itself is on the 9th of April, which is a Thursday. And then, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday will be the awards. The screenings, I'm sorry.
So you have plenty of complexities behind the scenes, and of course there must be many challenges kind of mounting an event such as this. But from the outside, it certainly does appear that you're taking many steady strides. And so now kind of getting down to brass tacks and the nominees themselves. Yep. By now the nominees have been revealed to the public. And would you say that they're a fair indication of the Korean film, indie film scene as it is?
Yeah, we have 2 main categories: the narrative film Best Director nominees, and then the documentary Best Director nominees. And so there'll be one film chosen from each of those groups, plus the grand prize will be chosen from those as well. And yeah, I mean, I find myself, I mean, from my perspective, this is obviously a very subjective sort of thing, but I felt that we were able to kind of group in most of the really great films of the past year. There are a few films that I wish had received a nomination that hadn't, but those type of films are films that I really love kind of on a more personal basis. And I think objectively as a critic, I agree quite strongly with the kind of the final choices that were done in the categories. One challenging, I think, is that when you look to the other categories like screenplay and others, there's a lot of repetition from the main nominated categories, and I think that we may try to think about different ways of structuring the system to kind of get more diversity of choices in the future. And so there are 21 different films that received at least one nomination. But actually, people who've been watching a lot of independent films over the past year there may be certain titles that they say, "Oh, why didn't that one get in?" And why didn't this particular performance get recognized? And I think those are legitimate points, but it is hard with a limited number of awards.
Absolutely. So have you done a tally? Do you know which films got the most nominations?
Well, there are a few that I mean probably won't come as a big surprise to people who've been following, but a film like Hangongju, for example, is one that received awards in multiple categories. Of course, Chun Woo-hee has been winning a lot of awards, and in the mainstream, film award ceremonies as well. And so, we certainly wouldn't leave her out of this one just because she's been successful in other places. And so, she probably is the front runner for the Best Actress category. But we'll wait and see because, I mean, Bae Do-na in A Girl at My Door is also
some serious competition.
Yeah, I mean, she's been nominated as well in other. In China at the Asian.
Is she also nominated in Best New Actress?
Chun Woo-hee actually is not in the Best New Actress category because we had a difficult time choosing with that because
she has been active for a long time.
Yeah, she has, and so we don't have very strict guidelines for that because I think that at first we did, but we found that in the end that was maybe less effective than trying to figure it out. But and so the Best New Actress category is quite competitive, I think. There, I'm curious to see who comes out on top in that. Because I'll mention the Best New Actress categories. Kong Ye-ji in Shuttlecock, which was an interesting film that didn't get a lot of attention. I think that this might be I hope it's a chance for some people to kind of encourage them to go back and see the film. There's Kim Soo-an, who's a child actress who's extremely talented.
Incredible.
Best known perhaps for some of her short films, like the short film Sprout was at the Berlin Film Festival. But she also appeared in an omnibus film called Mad Sad Bad in the 30-minute film Picnic, directed by Kim Tae-young. She gave an amazing performance, and so she's nominated as Best New Actress. Park Joo-hee in The Wicket, a really nasty film, but a really interesting genre film. And she gave a really stand-up performance in that as well. Lee Yoo-young, who was in the movie Late Spring, she has already received some attention, and both abroad and in Korea. For
was it an award from the Milan International Film Festival?
Yes,
yes.
Best
Actress.
Before it was released in Korea. And so, but yeah, she's a really interesting actress as well. And then Hwang Seung-un, who is in The King of Choku. It's a
of course.
Yeah. The King of Choku is another film that received a lot of nominations and support. It's a comedy that, but not a typical comedy, and one that had a great leading performance from the main actor, who's also, of course, nominated in the Best Actor category. And yeah, and it is nominated for Best film as well.
Film as well. It's great to see kind of a comedy in the mix there, because typically when people think of Korean indie cinema, it's often kind of the darker social dramas.
Yep.
It's nice to kind of reflect a more diverse scene, as it were.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, that was one reason why I wanted to include a very diverse group of voters, and not only film critics or only people in the industry itself. And there is so much diversity in the films that are coming out right now that one of the challenges for us is to make sure that we recognize that diversity.
Do you want to cover any of the other nominations?
The documentary category was another one that had a lot of competition. And I'm really curious to see if a documentary manages to take the grand prize this year. I think that there's I don't know, again, the voting hasn't taken place yet. I don't know who's going to win, but I think that there's a good chance that that might happen because there are a number of very, good documentaries that have come out that have been very strongly supported by critics. But we'll see. And I mean, there's 7 in the Best Director documentary category. And quite a lot of diversity in this as well. I mean, there's A Dream of Iron,
of course,
which screened in Berlin, won some prizes in Berlin. There's My Place, which is a really interesting documentary that is about a director's own personal experience and his family. It opened last year, and I was a little disappointed at the amount of people who saw it in Korea, and so I'm hoping it's part of our screening series, and I'm hoping that more people come back and watch it again. Manshin by Park Chan-kyung, Park Chan-wook's younger brother, who in his own right is a really accomplished artist, and he did really interesting creative things in this film. There's the controversial documentary about the Sewol sinking, The Truth Shall Not Sink with Sewol. There's The Hospice by Lee Chang-jae, which came out at the end of 2014. He has done some interesting previous documentaries, one on shamanism, one on Buddhism, and this one looks at people, faced with the end of their lives. They move into a hospice home where they're cared for, and I just found this film really moving and interesting.
Yeah, I liked it as well. It did quite well. It seemed to connect with viewers here.
Yeah, it came out at the same time as another documentary that was hugely popular.
Yeah. That's right.
It made over close to 5 million admissions.
Yeah, that's another league. And his last one was also quite successful here. It was the one with the Buddhist monk on the road.
Yes.
What was it called again?
Yeah. I think the English title was Bhikkhuni Buddhist Nuns on the Road.
On the road. That's right.
And up to this point, he's in his first film also as well, the one about shamanism called Between. I think it set a new record at the time for a local documentary.
Wow.
And so he's a really interesting filmmaker. He's not a director who puts a lot of himself into the film. Like, you don't notice his particular style in the way that you might for some other directors. But after watching 3 of his films, you get kind of the sense for his interests and his, kind of concern for humanity, and the sense that he's asking really deep questions through these documentaries. The last 2 are Nonfiction Diary,
of course,
and My Father's Emails, which is another personal story that looks at kind of social and political issues through the director's own family.
All right. So now, how do you see the awards evolve going forward?
I mean, the biggest thing for us is that we need to survive and continue, and to make a history for ourselves. Because I think history is very important for these type of film awards ceremonies. The Oscars, of course, have this very, very long history, and that is a big part of its prestige. And obviously, we're starting later than we're only in our 2nd edition, but one thing I hear from a lot of people around us is that we really hope that this continues long into the future. And so our biggest goal is to make sure that it remains a long-term event. And I think I don't want it to grow really big. I mean, I think that there's a danger of letting it grow too big, in a sense that we're not trying to be the Grand Bell Awards and I think when you reach a certain size, we don't want it to be the type of situation where it becomes very formal. We don't want to lose that slightly informal quality to it. It's like the difference between, a big festival like the Cannes Film Festival and a smaller film festival that has a really distinct personality. And, most people who you talk to in the film industry actually prefer going to these smaller, less famous film festivals because they're more fun. They have more personality. And so we need to keep our personality. So hopefully we'll be able to do more in the future and do everything that we can to kind of promote independent films and to get more people noticing the films that we're nominating. But at the same time, it's not our goal to really take off. I think that we're just hoping to kind of remain consistent going into the future.
I really like this idea of kind of the longevity and some kind of posterity, because the nominees and of course the winners can then perhaps be remembered, kind of commemorated over the years. I mean, some of these films will have done well on the festival circuit, things like Hangongju and A Girl at My Door, A Dream of Iron. They've already kind of established some prestige, but a lot of those other films are films that didn't really screen internationally, and or perhaps just did screen in Korea but did not do very well, so they could easily be forgotten in the currents of time. So that's it could become a very valuable service.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a key point that you've mentioned, because I think that film festivals perform a different kind of function. I mean, they're the ones who introduce films for the first time, and they help to build a film's reputation and build directors' reputations. And I think our role is rather to help people remember them. And so the book is another part of that. I hope to, continue making the books into the future, and then, we'll continue to sell them at each edition of the awards, but also I have ideas in my head. I don't know if they'll happen or not. Like in the future, after we've done this for a number of years, we may be able to hold these small, like festival type screenings where we can screen films that have won awards in the past, and that would be another chance to kind of look back and remember these really interesting films.
All right. And with that, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but we'll all, I'm on tenterhooks to see who kind of comes out on top on April 9th. I'll have a lot of films that I'm rooting for. But as always, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and great to chat about the Wildflower Independent Film Awards, once again taking place on April 9th. And you can check out the nominees now at koreanfilm.org/wildflower.
There's that will take you there, and then we also have wildflower-awards.com.
Okay, so either of those, and check out the nominees for this year. So thank you very much, Darcy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and until next time, this has been your host, June and
Pierce.